Hey folks, Patrick Murphy, aka Prasicor here, and today we're going to take a look at the officially released trailers and the one clip for the upcoming BBC-produced nature series Prehistoric Planet, streaming on Apple TV Plus on May 23rd. The main point here is to both see how much we can learn about the show based on what's been released so far, and to give my own thoughts on the show's prospects. So, no point beating around the bush, let's get going. We open on a slow left pan over an empty beach, with white, frothy waves lapping at the bay's shoreline, leading up to the edge of a forest dominated by palms. The shot eases us into familiar natural beauty, before cutting abruptly to a close-up of the sand. The visual language suggests that this is the same beach, though the lighting tells us that this is either early morning or late evening. In the sand, there is an imprint. Viewed from the side, it may not be easily recognizable to many viewers, who may mistake it at first glance for something else, perhaps even an arrow pointing away from the ocean. This obtuseness is deliberate. It's an eye-catching shape, but its nature may not be clear. This is build-up to the eventual reveal of what this trailer is actually about. The first teaser did this as well, albeit in a shorter time frame, first teasing the rising sun, then the animals in the distance, obscured by a rippling veil of heat. The point is to grab you with the natural beauty of these scenic vistas, to ground you firmly in reality before the extraordinary nature of the program is revealed. It's also at this point that we first get Sir David Attenborough's narration. Attenborough is the most sensible choice for a project like this. He is a huge draw among natural history audiences, making him the safest choice in an otherwise risky venture. What's notable is that Prehistoric Planet invokes the feel of the original Walking with Dinosaurs miniseries. Attenborough had supposedly been approached to narrate Walking with Dinosaurs, but ultimately turned it down, deeming the program too speculative. As such, his involvement in Prehistoric Planet has raised some questions. What made Attenborough change his mind in the last 2 decades? Has he spoken with paleontologists and paleoartists, gaining a better appreciation for the role that speculation plays in realizing prehistoric animals in a visual medium? Has he come to regret giving up the Walking With gig in the wake of its overwhelmingly positive reception and legacy? Did they just pay him a shit ton of money?
The world may never know.
The next shot continues this theme of build-up, showing the ocean surface reflecting the harsh sunlight above, surrounded by tall rock faces to the right and on the horizon. 2 forms break the surface gently, leaving only the slightest wake before they descend once more. They're obviously animals, but again, what kind of animals may not be clear to a casual viewer, even if it's obvious to those of us familiar with Mesozoic animals. We cut to a shot deep in the forest, panning slowly right. The shot is obscured by leaves and twigs, but we can nonetheless see the head, perfectly still and held straight out. Again, while the prehistoric nature of the show is now clear to most, the trailer is still teasing us by only showing the head. This is Chanjusaurus, as revealed by lead consultant and co-creature designer Dr. Darren Naish. Its posture clearly indicates that it's focused deeply on something in front of it, and it will become clear what that is later on. The creature has been designed with a light coating of proto-feathers along the neck and yellow stripes that allow it to camouflage well against the forest landscape. Chanjusaurus is fairly distinctive among tyrannosaurs with its long, narrow snout, and it's known from pretty good material, making it a strong candidate for reconstruction. The presence of a confirmed taxon also gives us our first known location, Maastrichtian China, from the Nanxiang Formation. We cut to another shot of a beach, though whether it is the same beach as before or another one we can't say. Front and center is the giant edge-darked pterosaur Hatzegopteryx, as confirmed by Dr. Naish, silhouetted against the low-hanging sun. The teasing is finished. Here is a full shot of an undeniably prehistoric creature for all to see, perfectly revealed at Attenborough's use of the word magnificent. We also get a shot of the animal in flight, seemingly in the same location. Given the flight capabilities of giant edge-darked pterosaurs, this could be anywhere in the world. But the coastline makes me believe that this is meant to be the same location where Hatzegopteryx fossils have been found, the Shebez Formation in Romania. There is also a shot of Hatzegopteryx in the 30-second teaser, and the skies of both shots look very similar, leading me to believe that all three shots are in close proximity. Twitter user Alex Viara has adjusted the lighting of the shot in order to reveal more about the coloration of the animal. It shows a nice mixture of colors that create a striking pattern. As a giant pterodactyl, Hatzegopteryx makes for a strong start for the trailer, given many people's fondness for the flying dinosaurs. With series like this, it's a balance between the old favorites and new faces. In a way, Hatzegopteryx is both. Most people won't have heard of it, but it's still obviously a pterodactyl, and that's what matters. One issue I have with these shots is that they don't do a clear job of illustrating the size of this animal. It's not immediately clear just by looking at it here that this creature has a wingspan of over 10 meters. We fade out from the pterosaur and cut to a close-up of a very dirty foot, brandishing a very familiar sickle-shaped claw held aloft as Attenborough hits the word monstrous, obviously meant to call to mind the popular image of Velociraptor from the Jurassic Park films as a fearful predator. The texture on the foot is exquisite, with the kinds of small folds and wrinkles you might see on an ostrich or emu foot. However, despite the reference to Jurassic Park, there is a noticeable group of primary feathers in the upper right-hand corner. It takes a slow, careful step, which is in keeping with the next shot, showing the dromaeosaur lowering its head with equal caution. Note how the animal is out of focus at the top of the shot, but as it lowers its head, it comes into focus. Its jaw quivers slightly, and you can see the purpose in its eagle-like eye. Everything about its behavior suggests stalking. This last shot was also in the 30-second teaser. Both trailers treat the presence of feathers on this dromaeosaur with great care. They don't reveal the full feathering clearly, and only give small glimpses of the animal. In the balance between the new and the familiar, these shots skew toward the familiar. The claw is plain to see, but even the close-up of the face works this way. Despite the feathers, the actual outline of the animal isn't 1,000 miles away from what we see in the Jurassic Park raptors. While Prehistoric Planet doesn't compromise with the science, it also understands that if you go too far, too quickly, you risk alienating the audience. Shots like these are meant to ease audiences unfamiliar with feathered dinosaurs into the new look. Note that I keep saying Dromaeosaur. Though initially thought to be Velociraptor, and seemingly confirmed as such by Naish would correct himself in a later tweet and claim that the identity of the animal is, quote, complicated, unquote. As such, we can't know for sure either what this is or where it's located. There are plenty of possibilities, but I'm going to err on the side of caution for now. Another shot from the teaser, as Attenborough says the word misunderstood, we cut to a pair of shots of a giant theropod that can only be Tyrannosaurus rex, swimming in fairly deep water. Once more going back to the balance between familiar and new, this one goes hard down the middle. It's a familiar dinosaur, it's the familiar dinosaur, but it's doing something unconventional. Dr. Darren Naish is well known as the co-author of All Yesterday's unique and speculative views of dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures. Part of the purpose of All Yesterdays is to show that animals are not confined by the limitations of their anatomy, and will engage in all kinds of behaviors that might otherwise be considered abnormal. Animals are complex, and will do strange things, sometimes for no other reason than that they can. Moose, elephants, and even proboscis monkeys have all been documented far out at sea. The promise here is that, yes, we have your favorite dinosaurs, but we're going to be doing some new things with them, which is another great hook. Anyone worried about whether T-Rex could swim should note that almost all animals can swim, and models of theropod dinosaur biomechanics and trace fossils show that they were no different in that regard. The second shot also reveals that our Rex is not alone, and has 3 chicks in tow, but we'll talk more about them later. The appearance of T-Rex also gives us our second confirmed location, somewhere in Maastrichtian Laramidia, possibly the Hell Creek Formation, or somewhere further south. The next shot is the first reveal of an animal that didn't appear in the 30-second teaser. A small, chubby ornithopod, slate gray with blue stripes. Some have claimed that this is meant to represent Zalmoxes, which is another animal known from the Sebes Formation, but we don't know for sure. If this is meant to be Zalmoxes, it appears unusually small, and it doesn't have the proportions we might expect for a baby. Of note is the extensive cheek tissue around the mouth. The issue of oral tissue in ornithischians is a contentious one, with different hypotheses being put forward based on different lines of evidence. Naish has stated that he leans more in the direction of cheek tissue in ornithischians, though a variety of looks were chosen for the series animals. This animal definitely goes to the extreme side of the cheeky interpretation. Overall, the purpose of the shot is to vary the tone of the series, which has so far emphasized beauty and tension. This shot introduces a cute animal, showing us that the show will evoke a variety of emotions. Next, we have a trio of nodosaurs meandering through the forest. The camera movement here is stealthy, slowly panning right behind a tree as if to keep out of sight. The color of the environment seems very close to that of the preceding shot, leading many to believe that this is meant to be the same forest. If so, and we go with the interpretation of the last shot as the Sebes formation, then these could be Struthiosaurus, which is also known from Maastrichtian Transylvania. But remember, that's based on the assumption that this is based on the Sebes formation, which isn't a given. I'm not above speculating, but we do have to remember the limits of our guessing. Showing Thyreophorans introduces more animal variety. The next shot is the first time in either the teaser or this trailer that we go back to a previous locale, revisiting the Dromaeosaur from the previous scene. Even now, they're still playing cautiously with the feathered dinosaur. Here we see it in full, completely feathered, but our eyes are also drawn to the huge Tyrannosaurs lounging on the rocks. It's the appearance of these Tyrannosaurs that make the identity of the Dromaeosaur difficult to pin down. There are very few giant Tyrannosaurs apart from T-Rex itself, which has led many to conclude that this is probably Tarbosaurus. However, while Velociraptor is known from the Jadokta formation, Tarbosaurus is known from the Nemeth formation, so depicting them coexisting would be odd. It is possible that the Dromaeosaur in question is meant to be Adasaurus, which is known from the Nemeth formation, but Adasaurus is known for having a reduced sickle claw, unlike the large one we saw earlier. It's also possible that the Dromaeosaur here is meant to represent the fragmentary unassigned Velociraptorine remains from the Nemeth formation. And yet a third possibility is that the series is taking advantage of the fact that both the Jadokta formation and Nemeth formation are from around 70 million years ago, and both are located in the Gobi Desert, to say that it wouldn't be the strangest thing in the world for Velociraptor to be coexisting with Tarbosaurus. Until Naish clarifies, we just can't know. Nonetheless, it's the Tyrannosaurs that are the true stars of this shot. They are huge and imposing, especially compared to the Dromaeosaur, and yet they camouflage so effortlessly against the rocks. You wouldn't think an animal the size of a bus would employ camouflage, and yet there they are. Their size and power is apparent, but it's brilliantly juxtaposed with them lounging around like big cats, grounding us further into reality. It's also been noted that both the Chanjusaurus and the Tarbosaurus have been given color schemes that feel well adapted to their respective environments, helping them to feel even more real. We cut to a shot of an eye opening, the visual language suggesting that it's one of the Tyrannosaurs before we cut to black. This shot does look a bit off to me. The lighting is very harsh, making it seem artificial. Then we cut back to one of the Tyrannosaurs with its mouth agape, letting out a deep roar. This same shot was in the 30-second teaser. It's worth noting that Dr. Naish claims that no one has yet correctly interpreted the nature of this shot, at least not as of April 6th. Though a generic stock roar sound effect plays over the shot in the 30-second teaser, many have pointed out that Naish's comment, and the curling tongue, might possibly indicate that this animal is actually yawning. Given that it had apparently just woken up, this would make sense. I should note that the camera feels like it's in an awkward position here, just sort of floating in midair. It might make more sense in context, but for now it feels odd. One of my favorite shots of the trailer is this next one, which features the grand, sweeping scale of Planet Earth, another program created by the same team as Prehistoric Planet. In many ways, Prehistoric Planet is basically Planet Earth meets Walking with Dinosaurs, and the trailers work to bring both to mind. The first shot of the 30-second teaser is obviously a reference to the opening title sequence to Walking with Dinosaurs. Not only is it visually almost identical, but it even has a similar musical cue. This isn't just nostalgia for dinosaur fans of a certain age. Walking with Dinosaurs remains one of the biggest and most beloved natural history programs ever produced. Its release was nothing short of an event for the BBC. Creating a deliberate audio-visual connection between the two is meant to communicate that Prehistoric Planet, like Walking with Dinosaurs before it, will be big. This is further confirmed by its release schedule, shown here. Prehistoric Planet will compose 5 episodes, the first of which will release on May 23rd. The next episode will be released the following night, and so on and so forth until the final episode is released on May 27th. Apple TV believes that this is something people will want to come back for. This shows a lot of trust in the production, and is a good sign overall. But bear in mind that it's still a risk, that even though natural history programming is generally very popular, Prehistoric Planet will come with a significantly higher price tag thanks to its use of CG, and Apple TV is far from one of the biggest streaming services. Dinosaurs are popular, but will they be popular enough to get people to subscribe? Apple TV is betting they will, but all bets come with a risk. I'm certainly hoping it will be popular, for many reasons, some self-evident, some of which I'll explain in greater detail. But as exciting as it may seem, especially to those of us with an existing passion for animals, both living and extinct, we have to accept that other people may just not bite, especially if it means subscribing to a streaming service that doesn't offer much else. That may sound pessimistic, but I'm just trying to be realistic, and to keep my own excitement in check. Because make no mistake, I am excited, and even though we only have about 3.5 minutes of footage to go off of, there are plenty of reasons why you should be too. One promising sign, though, is that, as of April 25th, the full trailer has 5 million views on the official Apple TV Plus YouTube channel. Not only is the shot grand in scope, but it's also filled with pterosaurs. One of my hopes for the show is that it will show a world that is positively teeming with life, to an extent that will make our anthropogenically impoverished world look barren and lifeless by comparison. Fossils, even the richest fossiliferous rocks in the world, only give us glimpses, fractions of fractions as to the extent to which this world was populated. Shots like these play into my hopes that Prehistoric Planet will feel truly full and alive. As to the identity of the pterosaurs, that is harder to pin down. By this point in the Cretaceous, only the Asdarchoids and the Nyctosaurids had living representatives, so that helps to narrow it down somewhat. The following shot shows many of these pterosaurs perched among the cliffs, with a lonely individual looking for space, only to find that there's no room at the inn. The body proportions appear in keeping with juvenile pterosaurs. If so, then the series could be taking time to explore the reproductive and growth strategies of pterosaurs, which seem to favor super precocious offspring capable of flying soon after hatching. Another possibility is that these are the as yet unnamed Hornby Island pterosaurs, a small Asdarchoid roughly the size of a cat. Next up is an obtuse close-up of what looks like wet, shaggy hair rising out of water. We cut to the supposed identity of the shaggy beast, the unmistakable Deinocheirus. Deinocheirus is another resident of the Nemeth Formation, meaning this is likely the same episode that features Tarbosaurus. Indeed, there's fossil evidence of interaction between the two dinosaurs. Again, the trailer aims to showcase a variety of dinosaurs, not only in terms of species diversity, but also in terms of the emotional reaction that they will get from the audience. Unlike the imposing Tarbosaurus or the magnificent Hatzegopteryx, the Deinocheirus is downright goofy looking. Another thing worthy of mention here is that the close-up of the feathers looks extraordinarily photoreal, even compared to the rest of the trailer, leading some to believe that this is a practical effect. Naish is thus far unable to confirm the use or lack thereof of any practical effects in the series, but if one wanted to make the case for their inclusion, this shot is probably your strongest bet. When we see its shaggy feathers rising out of the water, we can also see some kind of viscous blue material clinging to the filaments. What is this supposed to be? Is it meant to relate in some way to the Deinocheirus' blue face? Or is it an unintentional artifact and doesn't really mean anything? Who's to say? We cut to a wide shot of an island in a shallow sea. A large pterosaur can be seen soaring over the island in the distance to the left, as well as a smaller white bird to the lower right. Seeing a pterosaur by a coastline calls to mind the earlier shots of Hatzegopteryx, but based on the flora and the shape of the coastline, I think it's safe to say that this is a different location, though as always, more than willing to be wrong. Needless to say, the pterosaur is far too distant to be able to make any kind of guess as to what it is, let alone the bird. In the next series of shots, we see a pair of gray titanosaurs emerge from the forest and engage in some tender social interactions. The visual language definitely suggests that this is the same forest we saw on the island in the previous shot, but I do notice that these trees look different, more similar to what we saw with the Hatzegopteryx. It's important to remember that trailers routinely use the language of cinema to disorientate or even outright lie to the audience. If we assume this is meant to be the same beach as that of the Hatzegopteryx, then this could be Hatteg Island, the same location as the supposed Zalmoxes and Struthiosaurus. It's possible, then, that these could be Magyarosaurus or Paludatitan. As mentioned earlier, it's important that the trailers show a diversity not only of animal taxa, but of behavior as well. The social interaction between these two, our first sauropods, is the first time in the trailer that we've seen two dinosaurs of the same species display any affection. I do have to admit, however, that the shot of them leaving the forest from ground level does look off, but that could be due to the high contrast of the lighting, which washes out many of their details. The next pair of shots constitute huge desert mesas surrounded by yet more pterosaurs, giving us another sight of epic natural grandeur, followed by a POV shot from inside an unidentified carcass being picked over by more Asdarchids. The desertous location brings the earlier Nemeth Formation to mind, and these rock formations appear similar to the ones the Tarbosaurus were resting on. This could be the Nemeth, but this could also be a different desert location. However, it is more parsimonious to assume that this is a location we've seen already. Unidentified Asdarchid remains are known from the Nemeth Formation, though these are very large. It's hard to get an idea of the size of these Asdarchids given the perspective, but intuitively, they don't look as big as giants like Hatzegopteryx and Quetzalcoatlus. Then again, they might just be young ones. Showing Asdarchid scavenging is an interesting choice. Dr. Naish and fellow Prehistoric Planet consultant Dr. Mark Whitten are well known for positing that Asdarchids were terrestrial stalkers, hunting for prey while moving on the ground, snatching animals with their huge bills. Naish and Whitten have been adamantly opposed to the idea that Asdarchids were habitual scavengers, so this must be opportunistic behavior, in keeping with the all-yesterdays nature of the program. We get our first look at hadrosaurs in the next two shots as we fly over huge rolling mountains with smooth sides, very different from the steep rocky mesas of the previous scene. These are undoubtedly Olorotitan, placing us confidently in Russia. This close-up of the Olorotitan also shows a different approach to ornithischian cheek tissue than the earlier Zalmoxes. The following shot of a hatchling dinosaur surrounded by eggs is also likely Olorotitan. Could it be that this herd is traveling to their nesting grounds? The smoke rising from the mountains calls to mind certain ideas about dinosaurs using geothermal energy to incubate their eggs, albeit those ideas are usually in relation to sauropods. Next up, we have an aerial shot over a snowy wilderness looking down on a trio of theropods giving chase to a herd of ceratopsians. The sight of dinosaurs in the snow may come as a surprise to many viewers, a surprise highlighted by the excitement of the action. To me, the shot is very reminiscent of footage of wolves hunting elk. We get a closer look at the hunt as the ceratopsians bunch together, the theropods approaching carefully. Even in the midst of heavy snowfall, it is now clear that this is Pachyrhinosaurus. Based on the size, time, and presence of snow, this is most likely P. paratorum, placing us in the Prince Creek Formation of Alaska. That would make their pursuers Nanuqsaurus. If so, it's worth pointing out that Nanuqsaurus is now thought to have grown larger than presented here, though they may have finalized the designs before then. This is an inevitable consequence of paleo reconstruction, especially when combined with the time-consuming nature of television production. It's possible that they may account for this by having these three identified as adolescents in the narration. One of the more controversial decisions is to give the Pachyrhinosaurus extensive quills along their backs and tails. Skin impressions from other ceratopsians, such as Triceratops and Chasmosaurus, show no evidence of quills. This is a speculative choice justified by the presence of filamentous integumentary structures known from earlier ornithischians, such as Psittacosaurus and Culindodromeus. It is therefore a possible, if less parsimonious, interpretation of the available data. The bigger question that I have is what their adaptive purpose is. It's one thing to claim that Pachyrhinosaurus had the genetic information to produce these kinds of structures, but you then have to provide a reason for why Pachyrhinosaurus have them, while close relatives don't. The obvious answer is as a means of insulation, but these don't appear dense enough to provide much, especially compared to the woolly reconstructions seen in many pieces of paleo art. Another criticism of this scene is the portrayal of the weather. Though the Prince Creek Formation is located in the far north of Alaska, the average mean temperature was much higher, and it wouldn't have been the frigid wasteland that it is today. But Dr. Nasha stated that they worked with paleoclimatologists and climate modelers, and that heavy snowfall like that shown in the program would still have been possible, if uncommon. The next shot is perhaps the breakout shot of either trailer, providing one of the most memorable visuals. Once again, speculation and the all-yesterday school of thought is at the forefront of this reconstruction. There's no direct evidence of such structures in any known sauropod, but they are fairly widespread among living tetrapods. Furthermore, even if they were present, they may not leave any trace of their presence in the skeleton, meaning we wouldn't know about them even if they were there. Ultimately, these inflatable neck sacs are less about a specific hypothesis about the life appearance of these animals, and more a point about the limits of what we can tell from the fossil data, and the role that speculation plays in imagining extinct animals in art. It's more a comment about what we don't know, rather than what we do know. When Prehistoric Planet was first announced, it was said that it would take place in the final days of the dinosaurs and would, quote, transport viewers over 66 million years in the past. Because of this phrasing, many assumed that the series would take place entirely within the very end of the Maastrichtian, and they adjusted their speculations accordingly. As a result, many believed that this dinosaur is meant to be Alamosaurus from New Mexico, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. This identification may also have been bolstered by the Salt Flat location, which brings Utah to mind. However, the actual environments of late Cretaceous North America would have looked very different from how they look today. More importantly, Naish has declared in a tweet that these are not Alamosaurus, though he didn't specify what they are. The operative word in the synopsis is over 66 million years ago. So we are not restricted to the final years of the Maastrichtian, though we do seem relegated to the last 5 million years or so. Alamosaurus is, so far as I know, the only giant titanosaur known from late Cretaceous North America, meaning that these shots almost definitely take place in South America. With the time and place in mind, I think this is most likely Dreadnoughtus. Dreadnoughtus has received a good deal of notoriety over the last few years, thanks to a well-received PR campaign around the time of its publishing, and it also makes a cameo appearance in Jurassic World Dominion, as well as its 5-minute prologue. In addition to being a bit more well-known than other giant titanosaurs, Dreadnoughtus is known from relatively good material, making it a prime candidate for CG reconstruction. But even more remarkable than their appearance is their behavior. In the next shot, we see a huge gathering of these behemoths, with 2 massive individuals encircled by their peers. They pace around each other, examining one another carefully. We cut to a close-up of one of them, and see it practically snarling at its opponent. Before we have time to process this ferocious attitude, we abruptly cut to a wide shot of the 2 giants rearing on their hind limbs, crashing into each other like titanic sumo wrestlers, with our angry friend from the last shot lashing out and biting the other one's throat. Personally, this is the highlight of the trailer, perfectly combining all of its strengths. Here we have a beautifully realized animal, both scientifically credible and aesthetically pleasing, engaging in a truly novel and spectacular behavior. I recently observed northern elephant seals in the wild, and this confrontation definitely calls to mind the agonizingly brutal battles between bulls, throwing their weight against each other with blind rage. The shot is daring us to imagine that kind of fight, but where the combatants weigh not 2 to 4 tons, but over 50 tons. It also subverts the concept of sauropods as gentle giants, acknowledging that oftentimes large herbivores can be extremely aggressive and dangerous. But it isn't simply replacing one simplistic characterization with another. Recall the tender moment between the 2 titanosaurs earlier. The point is not that sauropods were aggressive rather than gentle, but that they were diverse, complex animals with a range of temperaments, personalities, and behaviors. Just like living animals. We see these creatures in the 30-second teaser as well, with a few shots that don't appear in the trailer, seemingly taking place before this battle. It shows the camera panning up over a wide, expansive salt flat, with the animals in the distance obscured by a rippling veil of heat. We then cut to a close-up of their legs and feet moving from camera left to camera right, partially hidden by shadow and dust particles. Lastly, we cut back to see them revealed in full against the sunlight. We return from the desert to snow in the next 2 shots, the first of which depicts an icy river flowing through the middle of a snowy forest. On the left side of the river, a herd of hadrosaurs can be seen moving toward the camera. Both adults and younger individuals are present. A close-up of the hadrosaurs suggests they are Edmontosaurus, and the earlier appearance of the Prince Creek Formation would support this conclusion. If so, these are the smaller Edmontosaurus species formerly assigned as Ugrunaluk, which are the only specimens known from Prince Creek. Diving into the depths of the ocean, we see two unidentified elasmosaurs, one larger than the other, and with two different color patterns, the implication being this is an adult with its offspring. Fossil evidence shows that plesiosaurs were viviparous and gave birth to a single, well-developed baby, suggesting that plesiosaurs nurtured their young like mammals. I don't think there's enough information to make a meaningful attempt at identification. From this perspective at least, elasmosaurs are very samey looking, and there's also no real sense of scale. Possibilities include Elasmosaurus, Styxosaurus, and Zeraphosaura. I'm most impressed by the lighting of the smaller individual. Underwater lighting in CG animals oftentimes appears very flat to me, but the stark harshness is very reminiscent of many animals today. A wide shot shows the two in a vertical position perpendicular to the ocean surface. What are they doing here? Suspended in the water column like sleeping sperm whales? Are they playing? Note the other elasmosaurs in the shot, one beneath them and two to camera left. The mystery could very well be the point. All good trailers need to have a few questions to keep the audience coming back for more after all. We return to our diminutive chubby gray friend in the next shot and find that it's not alone. 5 of these tentative Zalmoxes can be seen scampering down this moss-covered log. Again, I am struck by how small they are if they are supposed to be adult Zalmoxes. We can't rule out the possibility that they are juveniles, but again, they don't look like they have baby dinosaur proportions. Young dinosaurs undergo significant ontogenetic shifts, but where mammals start out chubby and get slimmer, dinosaurs seem to start out lanky and get chunkier. This can best be demonstrated with the baby T-Rex seen in the clip. But whether they are meant to be adults, juveniles, or another taxon altogether, their purpose in the trailer is clear: to be cute. Similar to cute is the feeling of endearment, which is what we see next with a pair of Tyrannosaurus nuzzling each other with their snouts on a riverbank. The wide shot reveals that the individual on the left has a wound on its right thigh, something we're obviously meant to puzzle over. The wound looks relatively fresh, though it isn't bleeding, leading me to believe that it was sustained a few days prior. The shape doesn't seem consistent with a bite from another T-Rex. The pattern looks more like a pair of slashes. Possibilities include a swipe by another Tyrannosaur's hind claws, an attack by a Dakotaraptor, which this tweet does seem to imply may be in the series, a gash made by a Triceratops browhorn in a transverse motion, or it scraped it on a branch or rock. Hey, this is a show that understands the value of mundanity as a source of grounding. In a similar vein, there may not be an explanation. The Walking With series would do this occasionally, where animals would sustain injuries off camera, leading the viewer to imagine for themselves how it happened. We know from the earlier shot and from the clip that a male T-Rex ends up becoming father to at least 3 chicks. Working backward, we might guess that one of these is the male in question, and these two are, or will, become a mated pair. Their calm social interaction is certainly in keeping with that idea. However, it's also important to remember that the narration in the clip definitely gives the implication of an introduction to T-Rex, meaning that that would be the first time we encounter the animal. If so, then this would have to take place afterwards, which doesn't give very high prospects for those chicks. Note that this behavior of the tyrannosaurs nuzzling each other is probably based on Naish's research into the craniofacial nerves of theropods, which demonstrates that their faces were quite sensitive, and theropods most likely used them for tactile sensation. A close-up of the pair doesn't reveal any new information, but I do just have to say how absolutely phenomenal both animals look. The detail is astounding. The skin looks like it has real texture, as if I could reach out and feel the pebbly sensation of their hides. The lighting is dynamic, and they are exquisitely rendered into the shot. The shape of the ridges and crests on the skull is based on the latest understanding of T-Rex facial tissue. The eyes look alive, avoiding the pitfalls of many CG characters. It appears as if extra special attention was given to everyone's favorite dinosaur, which would hardly be surprising. Another shot from the teaser, we see an elasmosaur, possibly one of the ones from earlier, erupting from the ocean surface in pursuit of prey, grabbing a fish. The shot appears to have been slowed down, though not by much, making it the first shot in any of the official released material in slow motion. Many have pointed out that the CG in the shot is perhaps the weakest. The water and the fish look extremely convincing, which leads me to thinking that they may be real, but the Elasmosaur doesn't look as good. We actually have some reason to believe that the 30-second teaser was put together over a year ago, and as such, this may be an unfinished shot, with the final looking much better. But we can only judge what we actually see, and what we see here looks weak compared to what we've seen elsewhere. Not that it looks bad, it's just that the rest of the trailer set a very high bar, which is a shame because the actual behavior on display I think is great. The visual of an aquatic predator exploding from the water while chasing prey is not only thrilling, but also very familiar to those who watch natural history programs. It's a well thought out combination of spectacle and grounding. Coming ashore once more, we have the dark horse of the trailer, the favorite of many, the unmistakable Carnotaurus in a forest. After a brief close-up of one, we cut back to see that it is looking at another, which stands tall and sticks out its ridiculously tiny arms, which are vivid blue. Like the Deinocheirus, the goal of the shot is comedy. It's a funny visual. The purpose of the behavior itself is undoubtedly as a form of sociosexual display. The two Carnotaurus are different colors, which may be sexual dimorphism. All Yesterdays actually features two illustrations of abelisaurs, one of them Carnotaurus itself, using their reduced arms in this exact fashion. I'm also struck by the excellent lighting of these animals, showing the broken filtered sunlight falling softly on their backs. Despite the popularity of the tiny arms, the Carnotaurus are probably the animals in the trailer that suffer the most from the unstoppable march of science. Some have noted that the skull appears too broad, with some research showing that the skull was much more narrow, although it should be noted that the only known skull of Carnotaurus was flattened during fossilization, so a broader skull can't be ruled out. In addition, the large feature scales are reconstructed in parallel rows running transversely down its back. Research in 2021 showed that they would have been more widely distributed along the back and flanks. Lastly, studies of the texture of Carnotaurus horns suggests that they were heavily keratinized, and so the actual appearance of the horns in life may have differed significantly from the bony horn cores. This is often the case with living animals as well. Naish has claimed responsibility for the errors, citing that the model was finalized before the research came out. As stated previously, television productions, especially ones on this scale, take a long time to make, and paleontology isn't put on pause to accommodate them. However, these mistakes are relatively minor, especially compared to dinosaur media in general, and it doesn't subtract significantly from the overall effect. Things don't stay dry for long, as we make for the ocean once more with a pair of shots featuring a pair of decidedly less amiable mosasaurs. Though they have a very traditional counter-shaded color scheme, both of them sport a vivid patch of red running down their backs. One of them seizes the other by the neck in its jaws, and then pushes it downward into the rocky seafloor. Though the fight is pretty cool, this is another shot that doesn't feel right. I think it's the fact that even though the animals look huge, there isn't a sense that they're disturbing the water around them, or that the water is providing much resistance despite how fast they're moving. I'm not sure how or even if that can be fixed, but for now, it's an issue. Which again is a shame because, come on, it's giant mosasaurs fighting. The animals are moving too chaotically for an identification. They do look very big, but all the big three giant mosasaurs, Hadrosaurus, Tylosaurus, and Mosasaurus, all lived in the Maastrichtian. We also have no clue where this could be, as Mosasaurus fossils have been found everywhere from the Midwestern US, the Netherlands, and even in Antarctica. Given the presence of long-necked elasmosaurs, we might guess this is the Western Interior Sea, as it is a very popular location for late Cretaceous marine settings, but it's far from a given. From the very wet to the very dry, we rejoin our gray Dromaeosaur, this time with two companions, with an overhead aerial shot overlooking a raging waterfall. One of the animals approaches the very edge, looking down at the violent waters with apprehension, almost as if contemplating a jump. Some have claimed that the second animal in procession has a slight pink tint to it compared to the others, though that could just be the lighting. This shot definitely has a strong sense of story and character. There's obviously some kind of relationship between the three, and I can't help but wonder what brought them to this waterfall, and what's compelling the brave individual at the edge to get so close. The next shot is our first look at an animal that isn't one of the big Mesozoic three, a dinosaur, a pterosaur, or a marine reptile. The large Cretaceous frog Beelzebufo crashes through the mud, its huge pink tongue shooting out to do the thing that Beelzebufo loves to do in paleomedia: grasp a small fleeing dinosaur. Hey, sometimes the classics are classic for a reason. The Beelzebufo looks astonishing with a credible, charismatic appearance that forgoes the typical practice of scaling up a horned Pac-Man frog. A nice feature are these small spines along the back. The globs of mud and water are also extremely effective, making the scene very dynamic. It's nice that the epic shots aren't being reserved for the huge and powerful, and are also used to highlight the beauty of the weird and little. This is our second slow-motion shot. The dinosaur is a little harder to pin down, but the presence of Beelzebufo helps us to narrow things down to Maastrichtian Madagascar. Not many dinosaurs are known from the Mavarano Formation, so it's fairly easy to conclude that this is meant to be the Noasaurid Machikosaurus. Having said that, if it is meant to be Machikosaurus, it's a very young individual. Also note that it lacks the characteristic snaggle-toothed appearance of Machikosaurus, which is probably obscured by oral tissue. Next up is one of the most captivating shots, despite its understated nature. At first, it appears as a simple close-up of some kind of small feathered dinosaur, but a closer look reveals a more drastic situation. There are multiple bright reflections in its eyes, a hint of smoke rising around it, and bright orange sparks. It's easy to conclude that this poor creature is in the midst of a fire, and if you examine its behavior carefully, you can tell that it's very anxious. It's not immediately apparent, but there are signs of beak tissue on the tip of the snout, though the animal also has teeth. This has led many to conclude that this is Bolor, a small theropod of uncertain affiliations. Some studies have recovered it as a dromaeosaur, while others consider it a basal aviolin. However, Naish has published on Bolor, finding it to be an aviolin, so that interpretation seems more likely for Prehistoric Planet. Bolor is also a reasonable identification given that we already have strong reason to believe that Hatzig Island is one of the locations, and Bolor is yet another animal known from the Sebes Formation. We return to our friend Chanjusaurus, and here it seems we discover what it was so focused on before. Here it's chasing some very blue theropods through a forest alight with autumnal colors. A similar shot appears in the 30-second teaser. The trailer isn't shy about showing predatory behavior, unsurprising given that, as far as natural drama goes, few things beat the eruption of sudden, explosive violence like the hunt. However, hopefully Prehistoric Planet will be able to show the nuances that go into predation, such as the thought that goes into selecting a target and laying an ambush, or the fact that oftentimes hunts fail for the hunter. The confirmed identity of Chanjusaurus allows us to look at the other known animals from the Nanjiang Formation to determine the identity of these blue beauties. The most likely answer is Corythoraptor, an oviraptorosaur. Next, we have an overhead shot looking down at a trio of Triceratops as they wander through the forest, moving toward the bottom of the shot. Again, it's clear to see the attention that was given to the coloration, as the Triceratops blend in perfectly with the forest habitat. The individual toward the bottom has brighter highlights of red on its frill than the one toward the top, which may be possible sexual dimorphism, or could just be individual variation. But the real star of this sequence appears in the next shot as a hideously adorable baby rounds the corner of a tree. Its colors have much greater contrast and the frill is bright red. The difference in color reminds me of the changes in color that tapirs go through as they age. For those that may not know, evidence from ontogeny shows that young Triceratops had very different skulls from the adults. We then move to a different ceratopsian, although one we've already seen. We return to the Pachyrhinosaurus in the snowy Prince Creek environment, in decidedly less distress. Two individuals butt heads. It's tempting to assume that these are two rival males competing for territory or mates, and it certainly could be. However, Naish has published on the role of mutual sexual selection in the evolution of frills, horns, and other elaborate bony structures in dinosaurs, so these could be two females. We also can't assume that this is antagonistic behavior. It could be social or play behavior. In the next shot, we see the silhouette of a Nyctosaurine pterosaur in flight over the surf. This is not Nyctosaurus itself, as Nyctosaurus is too old for the setting, and the crest is the wrong shape. We can't nail it down to one genus, but a few possibilities are Barbaridactylus and Alcyone. This animal also appears in this poster for Prehistoric Planet. The animal appears to be snatching a prey animal in flight. Going through the shot frame by frame, it looks most like it's eating a smaller pterosaur. Cannibalism, maybe? It could also be a bird. As we near the end of the trailer, we see a very small dinosaur, most likely an alvarezsaur, darting between the legs of yet another sauropod. The desertous locale suggests that we may have returned once more to the Nemeth Formation, a conclusion that may be supported by the following shot. A trio of these black and white alvarsaurs race across the screen from camera left to camera right, with one stopping to take notice of the dense herds of animals in the background. There's a large group of hadrosaurs, mostly idle, and behind them is a herd of titanosaurs moving from left to right. Many have pointed out that the skulls of the sauropods are extremely similar to the aptly named Nemetosaurus, though a Pisticellacaudia can't be ruled out. This would then make these alvarsaurs Nemetonicus, sensing a theme here, based on the size. Only two hadrosaurs are known from the Nemeth Formation, the crested Saurolophus and the crestless Barsboldia. Since these clearly lack crests, the latter seems a sensible identity. Seeing two different herds side by side is a very effective tactic. It's both visually interesting and evocative of similar sights in natural history programs featuring living animals. We cut to black and fade in on a close-up of a Tyrannosaurus as it rises from a resting position on the ground. As it rises out of view from the camera, we cut to an imposing shot of another Tyrannosaurus standing tall over a dead Triceratops, letting out a bellowing roar while looking at something off-camera, presumably the Rex from the previous shot. Despite its proximity to a dead Triceratops, there's no trace of blood nor any signs of a struggle on the T-Rex, so perhaps the animal died of other causes, and the T-Rex simply happened upon it. Though some evidence suggests that Triceratops had heavily keratinized faces, here it is portrayed with scales on its face and frill, a deliberate choice by Naish. Now is a good opportunity to talk about the ways in which the animals of the series will vocalize. Some have expressed disappointment about the use of stock sound effects and open-mouthed roars in some of the animals. However, it is almost guaranteed that the stock sound effects in the trailers are temporary placeholders. And the actual sounds will be very different. On the use of open-mouthed roars, it needs to be stated that crocodiles today can and do make loud, open-mouthed vocalizations that can be likened to roars. But if they truly bother you that much, then I will point out that in the earlier shots of the two Rexes nuzzling, they were growling with their mouths closed. The Dreadnoughtus also make deep thumping sounds similar to shoebill storks using their inflatable neck sacs, again, with their mouths closed. And that brings us to the end of this amazing trailer. Here are some concluding thoughts and additional points before we review the clip. The main themes of the trailer are spectacle, subversion, juxtaposition, and realism, often employing more than one at the same time. Spectacle is achieved through the use of sweeping, majestic shots over vast, magnificent natural vistas, as well as in the choice of animals, choosing species with inherently high charisma, and then working to design them in a way that brings out the best of that natural beauty. Juxtaposition is used in tandem with subversion to create interest. Familiar animals are juxtaposed with unusual anatomies or behaviors. Likewise, extraordinary animals are juxtaposed with familiar real-world visuals. Those real-world visuals help to ground us in reality, adding to the realistic aspect. Additionally, the animals are designed to be as scientifically credible as possible, and are portrayed with naturalistic behaviors helping them to feel as real as possible. All of this comes together to show a series that will bring us the visual spectacle that the BBC Natural History Unit is known for, with the most wondrous creatures in the history of life on Earth, in a way few have ever imagined. Running through our prospective settings, here are the locations that are either confirmed by a definitive taxa or are considered very likely based on what we've seen. The Nanjing Formation, China; the Sibas Formation, Romania; the Nemeth Formation, Mongolia; the Hell Creek, or an analogous formation such as the Lance Formation, United States; the Udor-Chukan Formation, Russia; the Prince Creek Formation, Alaska; the Cerro Fortaleza Formation, Argentina; the La Colonia Formation, Argentina; the Mevarano Formation, Madagascar. This tweet from Naish also suggests that the La Meta Formation from India and the Ouled Abdoun Formation from Morocco will be included as well. This gives us 11 confirmed locations, likely with more yet to be revealed. This is important because it relates directly to the structure of the episodes, something that hasn't been revealed officially. However, I do have a theory. We know there are 5 episodes in total, and we have well over 5 confirmed locations. Though Prehistoric Planet is definitely invoking walking with dinosaurs through this trailer, this is one way in which they will differ. Walking with Dinosaurs focused on individual episodes set in one specific location per episode. If there are more locations than episodes, then Prehistoric Planet will have to have a different format. Looking at the official synopses released by Apple TV, there are certain lines that stick out. Here are some as follows. Quote, set against the backdrop of the environments of Cretaceous times, including coasts, deserts, freshwater, ice worlds, and forests. Unquote. Quote, Prehistoric Planet will transport viewers over 66 million years in the past to discover our world and the dinosaurs that roamed it. Unquote. Quote, the groundbreaking series combines extraordinary filmmaking with the latest in state-of-the-art technology and scientific learnings to unveil the spectacular habitats and inhabitants of ancient Earth for a one-of-a-kind immersive experience. Note how there's more emphasis on the environments than on the dinosaurs themselves, a theme that continues in the trailer. This leads me to the possibility that Prehistoric Planet will have a format similar to Planet Earth, which wouldn't be all that surprising given they're both produced by some of the same people. The original Planet Earth featured 11 episodes, each one 60 minutes long, including a 10-minute behind-the-scenes featurette. Each episode centers on a different biome. For example, the second episode is titled Mountains, and features segments in the Alps, the Rockies, and the Himalayas, among others. Prehistoric Planet could do something similar, focusing on different biomes from across the late Cretaceous. One episode could center around deserts, and include segments from both the Nemegt and Cerro Fortaleza formations. This would distance it from Walking with Dinosaurs, which featured 6 30-minute episodes that focused on a single location each. The two different styles have their advantages and disadvantages. Walking with Dinosaurs' biggest advantage is that by focusing on a small number of featured taxa, the show can go into more detail, giving us a more complete, complex picture. It also has the advantage of telling a more complete and fulfilling story. However, the Planet Earth format is able to include more content, showing more locations and more animals. But remember, more isn't necessarily better. But this is just speculation for now, based on the little we have to go off of. At this point, we don't even know what the runtime of each episode is. Either way, I think there's a good chance that Prehistoric Planet will have a different episode format than Walking with Dinosaurs. However, we do get some idea of how the series will present itself thanks to a 1-minute 39-second clip, and if this clip is indicative of the rest of the show, we have a lot to be excited about. We fade in on a close-up shot of baby turtles digging their way out of the sand and scrambling for the surf. The narration tells us that this is, quote, dawn, on the shores of the ancient Tethys Sea, unquote. There are 2 problems with this line. First of all, as many have noted, Tyrannosaurus rex isn't known to have inhabited areas lining the Tethys Sea. The Tethys is usually defined as being located between Africa and Eurasia, connecting to the Indian Ocean from the west at its northernmost tip. However, Tyrannosaurus fossils are only known from western North America. Though a shallow sea did cover the Midwest United States during the late Cretaceous period, and was in the process of receding by the time of T. rex, this body of water is called the Western Interior Seaway, not the Tethys. When questioned on this, Naish explained that there is some literature which refers to this body of water, homologous to the modern Caribbean Sea, as the Caribbean Tethys, though he also acknowledges that this isn't ideal, and calling the area the Western Interior Seaway would have been better. Another small problem here is that Attenborough refers to this as dawn when it very clearly isn't. Dawn is sunrise. The sun is already pretty high in the sky at this point. Looks around 10 a.m. to me. Whatever. There's been some discussion as to whether or not these turtles are real or CG. I've gone back and forth on the matter myself, and Naish has made it clear that even on this matter, he's sworn to secrecy. However, Naish has also said that the turtles are modeled after Ridley sea turtles, Lepidochelys, and they seem based off of olive Ridley sea turtles, L. olivacea, in particular. His reasoning is that the lineage that includes Ridley sea turtles had existed in the late Cretaceous period, but whether that's meant to justify using modern olive Ridley sea turtles as stand-ins, or for basing CG models off of said turtles is anyone's guess. But the fact that this is even an issue of debate is a testament to the quality of the series' CG. To be honest, I actually hope they are CG. One thing that Naish has spoken of in the past is the fact that the Mesozoic era wasn't simply home to dinosaurs, but to an array of living things as vast and diverse as what we see today. Simply using modern turtles as stand-ins, even if they make for phylogenetically appropriate stand-ins, treats them as an afterthought. Designing, modeling, animating, and rendering turtles with as much care as the dinosaurs shows that they are just as dedicated to all the inhabitants of the Mesozoic as they are the dinosaurs. However, that would also be an overall far more time-consuming and expensive process, so I can also understand them going with live Ridleys. Oh well, at least it wouldn't be as distracting as seeing a coati show up in the forests of early Cretaceous Antarctica. More importantly is the sense of grounding. The image of sea turtle hatchlings digging their way out of the sand and racing for the water is an archetypal natural history visual. It grounds us firmly in the real world. Real or CG, this could easily be something you might see on an episode of Planet Earth. Indeed, we have. The illusion remains until this shot. A shape appears in the background, blurry and out of focus. Attenborough tells us that the turtle has been spotted by, quote, a hunter, unquote, but he doesn't tell us what kind of hunter. If you didn't know you were watching a dinosaur show, you might not necessarily know that the animal in the background is a dinosaur. The camera follows the turtle as it continues moving toward camera right, and the mystery animal leaves the shot. The tension of this buildup is released suddenly and unexpectedly when the snout of the animal appears from camera left, tentatively examining the turtle. Even then, we only see its face, as well as its legs and feet. Again, if you're not familiar with the current thinking as goes the life appearance of dinosaurs, there's a chance you might not recognize this as a dinosaur. Finally, we cut back and see the animal's full body, and even accounting for the feathers, there's no denying it's a dinosaur, and Attenborough identifies it as a young Tyrannosaurus, sporting a juvenile's feathery coat. Note here how the narration doesn't bother to explain the presence of downy feathers on T-Rex, something that will catch many viewers off guard. This suggests that the narration style will more closely follow the Walking with Dinosaurs format of immersion. Rather than cutting away from the action to explain the paleontological reasoning behind the life appearance and behavior of the dinosaurs, the episode will remain focused on the story. This will help to maintain the illusion that the animals are real and that we are witnessing their daily lives. Walking with them, you might even say. Having said that, I am almost certain that there will be some kind of supplementary program that will dive deeper into the fossil evidence behind the series' choices. This would explain why those involved with the production are still sworn to secrecy, even about things that we've seen with our own eyes. Again, though, I'm not sure what the format of that will be. Like Planet Earth, each episode could end with a behind-the-scenes featurette. There could also be an entirely separate program released alongside the series proper. The Science of Prehistoric Planet, or something like that. Regardless of the exact nature of this material, it's clear that it will be kept separate from the actual show in order to maintain the sense of immersion. The baby T-Rex itself looks fantastic with an incredible attention to detail. The color pattern seems based on those of baby ostriches and other ratites, and the curiosity and awkwardness it exhibits is extremely endearing. This is an effective way to make the baby Rex relatable without relying too much on over-anthropomorphizing it. The way that it paws the baby turtles reminds me of the way my cats will interact with bugs whenever they find them in the house. They know they're supposed to do something, but not entirely sure what. I also love the way it kicks up the sand as it runs, leaving behind some very nice footprints on the shore. It's also worth noting that the turtles in these shots have to be CG, otherwise the whole scene would be horrifically unethical. It finally seems to realize that it's supposed to eat the turtles and gives chase to the first one as it approaches the waves. Just as it's about to snap up the poor thing, a sudden wave of white froth sweeps over the helpless turtle, and the chick panics. A wonderful detail is the close-up of the face as it stares back at the ocean, trying to understand what the hell just happened. Despite the lack of anthropomorphic facial expressions, it's so easy to see the brain working behind the eyes as it slowly figures out what happened and that it failed. In an action that can almost be interpreted as embarrassment, the chick runs back up the beach from where it came. A lovely touch is the bird that flies in front of the camera as we follow the chick. Small touches like these help to maintain the sense of immersion. Like with real documentaries, Cretaceous birds don't care if you're trying to get a good shot. The camera follows it, the music beginning to swell, and as it pans up we get our first sight of the adult. First, we see its feet as it takes a step, kicking a small stream of sand forward and pressing its toes into the ground. The anticipation reaches its apex as the adult leans down to examine the chick. It very carefully nuzzles the chick before giving it a small push. The surprised chick looks back at the parent as it stands back up to its full height, and here we see the adult Tyrannosaurus revealed in all of its splendor. The Tyrannosaurus' immense bulk stands in stark contrast to the lanky, gracile proportions of the chick. If anyone thought the chick looked suspiciously skinny, the adult will have the opposite reaction. Some online have already wondered if the T-Rex is too bulky, but Tyrannosaur experts have come forward to point out that it's well within the known parameters of individual variation in specimens of T-Rex. The powerful muscles can be seen working under the skin, especially in the thighs. A very sparse coating of protofeathers can be seen covering its body, especially over its head and neck. Most of the animal is dark brown, with jaguar-like rosettes, save for lighter coloring along its underside. The snout also has lighter markings with dark stripes along the upper jawline. I pointed these out on Twitter, wondering if these stripes were meant to recall the overhanging teeth of lipless reconstructions of T-Rex, like the Jurassic Park version. The effect being that those who are more familiar to seeing lipless reconstructions may accept this one more easily since the markings may subconsciously remind people of the lipless ones. A way to ease it into them, as it were. Dr. Naish did confirm that the stripes are a deliberate design choice, though he wouldn't elaborate on the reasoning behind them. The animation of the adult Rex is stunning. All it does is lean over, take a step, and stand back up. And yet so much of its power and dignity is conveyed. It weighs several tons, and yet it carries this weight and muscle power with great care, especially as it interacts with the chick. As it adjusts its right foot, it pushes it further into the sand, which wells up between its toes. This is a creature with pride and beauty that doesn't feel the need to show off. It doesn't need to stomp or roar. It communicates so much more with so much less. Prehistoric Planet definitely seems to know the value of less is more. There's a very good chance that this scene is a prelude to the shot from the trailer of the T-Rex going for a swim with his 3 chicks. Some behind-the-scenes rumors suggest that at some point there will be a confrontation between a Mosasaur and a T-Rex, and it's very tempting to think that that's the next step in the proceedings. I can't help but be reminded of this shot from the trailer, of a wave washing away a T-Rex footprint on the beach as the sun sets. The language of cinema tells us that this is meant to show how even the largest and mightiest creatures fade with the passing of time, and that our tyrant lizard king may not be long for this world. Not surprising given that T-Rex families in these sorts of programs don't have a promising track record. Rip Hank. The interaction between the adult and the chick is great. Despite being a specific action, its nature is ambiguous. Is this a playful nudge from an encouraging parent helping its awkward chick to become a more assured, competent predator? Or is it an annoyed push from a parent that, after examining the chick and seeing there's nothing wrong with it, just wants to be left alone? There's no way to know, but what we do know is that this interaction, whatever it is a careful, deliberate action taken by a thinking creature with its own sense of autonomy. Another important thing to note is the nuzzling behavior. Not only is such behavior seen in living reptiles, but again it also aligns with Naish's studies on the complex nature of nerves in the faces of theropod dinosaurs. The Rex is given an introduction befitting the most powerful predator. But before the narration can descend into the normal overhyped platitudes extolling T-Rex as the most badass killing machine in the history of life, it pulls back to reality, and Attenborough informs us that it's an animal we are witnessing at a particular point in its life, being a father. This is not T-Rex in the abstract. not T-Rex the idea. This is a specific individual with its own life history and personality. It's easy to believe that this T-Rex may have wandered this same beach in pursuit of hatchling turtles when he was the same age as his chicks, brought here by his father to take advantage of this annual event. The clip is only a minute and a half long, and yet it is filled with promise. The dinosaurs are the perfect synthesis of all manner of ideas regarding both fossil animals and living species, as well as the absolute best of visual effects to create the best approximation to the real animals as possible. The animation is astounding, with a true sense of weight and presence, and the interaction between the dinosaurs and the sand really helps to make it feel like they are really there. The character animation finds the perfect balance of making the animals feel like they have individual emotions and personality without relying on anthropomorphization. We may not always know what they're thinking or feeling, but it's also patently obvious that they are thinking and feeling. Their thoughts and emotions are their own, with no need to project humanity onto it. If the rest of the series maintains these strengths, then Prehistoric Planet could end up being one of the greatest pieces of dinosaur media ever created. And if that wasn't enough to get you excited, it's also worth mentioning that Dr. Naish has made it very clear that there's still so much more that we haven't seen yet. At the risk of counting my aviolins before they've hatched, based on what we've seen so far, Prehistoric Planet is shaping up to be nothing short of a miracle. A major Hollywood producer, most known for his work with Disney, Marvel, and Star Wars, whose filmography had no hint of a professional interest in natural history, teams up with the BBC to produce a big-budget dinosaur series unlike anything seen since the original Walking with Dinosaurs. Not only that, but they then take this a step further. Instead of simply hiring consultants to make sure the animals look as scientifically credible as possible, the producers hired whole teams of people to not only oversee the science, but to basically put them in control of the look of the animals. This goes beyond the scientific credibility of the creatures to something far more integral and rare. This is a project largely created by people who actually know and care about dinosaurs as they really were. It is fueled by the passion and love of people who've dedicated their lives to understanding these creatures as best we can, with what evidence we have to go off of. And rather than stifle that enthusiasm, Favreau and company have nurtured and encouraged it. I'd never heard of scientists and paleoartists having this level of creative input before, but the results speak for themselves. If we're lucky, this program will completely obliterate the idea that scientifically credible dinosaurs aren't as interesting as their movie monster counterparts. Assuming it's successful, Prehistoric Planet will open up the world to an exciting, new, and real world of prehistoric creatures, the likes of which most people never imagined. No longer will people feel a need to compromise between scientific evidence and artistic license. People will see how imagination and science work together to create a vision of the past as grounded in reality as it is filled with beauty. Before I get too excited, it's important to note that this is all contingent on Prehistoric Planet being as good as it looks, which it may not be. Even then, just because something is well made doesn't necessarily mean it will be appreciated, at least not in its time. But even if Prehistoric Planet fails to leave such a drastic impact, it will at least be good to have 5 episodes filled with unabashed, unashamed love for the Mesozoic and its inhabitants, undisturbed by executive fears. Such a thing is a once-in-a-lifetime project, and it's worth celebrating, whatever its shortcomings. And that is why I'm excited for Prehistoric Planet, and why hopefully you are too. Before signing off, here are some small tidbits that have either been revealed or strongly hinted at to further whet your appetite for the upcoming premiere. First, we'll take a quick look at this poster, which has a few neat details. The central focus is the shot of the T-Rex swimming, but looking carefully around the T-Rex, we see 4 fish. These appear to be pycnodontid fish, a known Cretaceous lineage. In fact, there is a Cretaceous pycnodontid called Scalacurvichthes naishi, named after none other than Dr. Darren Naish himself, though he denies that the species shown here is S. naishi, as that species lived earlier in the Cretaceous. Also of note is the large turtle in the lower right-hand side. It doesn't look like an olive Ridley sea turtle, so there's no reason to think that it's the adult version of the turtles seen on the beach. As for what it is, that's trickier to say. Archelon is tempting, but Archelon lived in the Campanian, not the Maastrichtian. Protostega is also too early to be correct. There is an unidentified giant Maastrichtian sea turtle known from Egypt, though that wasn't published until 2021. Another possibility is Oshapekhalon from Morocco, though the head shape seems wrong. Then again, it is somewhat difficult to make out. Note that the location doesn't necessarily matter here because posters often combine unrelated elements. The series will feature ammonites, most likely in the same episode as the elasmosaurs and the mosasaurs. The parenting behavior we see portrayed for the T-Rex is specific to the T-Rex. There will be other theropods that show different parenting strategies. Naish states that they worked with a whole team of paleobotanists to get the look of the flora right. Naish gave an intriguingly cryptic response to this tweet, hoping for the appearance of Majungasaurus, Dakotaraptor, Ankylosaurus, Deinocheirus, and Mosasaurus. Naish could be messing with us, but given that these are all either well-known and are charismatic late Cretaceous taxa, and seeing as Deinocheirus was confirmed in the trailer, it's definitely worth keeping them in mind. Lastly, here's a list of all those paleontologists and paleoartists that are known to have contributed to the show in some capacity so far. Note that this list is incomplete, and more people worked on the program than is currently known. Dr. Darren Naish, Dr. Mark Whitten, Dr. Scott Hartman, Dr. Liz Martin Silverstone, Dr. Steve Brusetti, Dr. Alex Farnsworth, Gabriel Ugueto, Bob Nichols, David Krentz, John Conway, Tom Parker. I'd also like to give a shout out to my friend Sophie, who helped me with many of the tentative animal identifications. Prehistoric Planet Episode 1 releases May 23rd on Apple TV+.